With the 2021 season now underway, and though it's only been a small sample size so far, it isn't unfair to look back at the moves that were made to see the first impressions that the players have made. While this offseason was super slow and it took a while for teams to get going, one thing I noticed was the free agent market. It had its big names, but when you compare it to next year's class, it's not that impressive. What has been impressive is the amount of money that's got thrown around. There were a lot of players who got paid this offseason. Unfortunately, these payments were a lot of overpayments. Nearly all of the big name free agents received a lot more money than they should have. So let's look at these signings, shall we? But before we begin, please make sure to like and subscribe for more baseball and other entertainment content. We won't go over every single signing, but just the bigger name players and the players who this was an issue for. Before we begin with the overpaying, let's start with the few players who were underpaid. Quick honorable mention that, had it been agreed upon, the Carlos Correa contract for 6 years $120 million would have gone in this section. Carlos Santana has quietly and consistently been one of the better first basemen in the game for the past few years, putting up a mix of great power numbers and great plate discipline. He's only second in walks in this decade to Joey Votto. Because of his down year in 2020, I'm not surprised he only got $17.5 million for 2 years, but maybe that's just because I was expecting him to get either more years or more money. Not sure which one, but was expecting more of both. This might be one of the biggest steals of the offseason. David Dahl has always been a great hitter and player all around. His only problem has been injuries. It's why Colorado non-tendered him, which came as a big shock to me. In a hitter's park like Globe Life Field, he should excel in it and get a bigger payday next year, provided he can stay healthy. $2.7 million is an absolute steal for this guy. I honestly thought the Yankees were going to overpay and throw at least $110 million at LeMahieu, but seeing him get only $90 million over 6 years seems like a bit of an underpayment. His first 2 years with the Yankees were MVP caliber seasons and helped basically carry them on his back at times when their lineup was decimated with injuries. The only question was how far the Yankees would go, seeing as how DJ only really wanted to play for them, so sitting at $90 million seems like a discount that LeMahieu was willing to take. It's good because they needed him badly for that lineup. It's also bad because now Gleyber Torres has to play defense at shortstop. Adam Duvall was quietly one of the best hitters in the 2020 season with 16 home runs. His injury history is probably the turning point from when the Braves run the NLCS started going down. I was surprised to see him non-tendered by the Braves, so $5 million was a cheap pickup for the Marlins, and they were in desperate need of a power bat outside of Jesus Aguilar. They just needed him to hit for them like he did against them. All memes aside, this is an absolute steal and possibly the biggest one of the year. 5 years and $26 million for a guy whose version of see-ball, hit-ball actually works for some reason. I have no idea how he does it, but David Fletcher is one of the many meme players in baseball that can actually play productively, and this contract extension was well earned. He definitely deserves more, especially for this being a 5-year deal, but it's David Fletcher and he gets to assist Mike Trout. Now for the nitty-gritty of why I made this video in the first place. A lot of these players either got more money or years than they should have, and the amount of players that this happened to is a lot more than you think. Some of these are more also personal opinions than others, and I can understand why some of them you wouldn't think are counted as overpayments. Before I begin, quick dishonorable mentions to Colton Wong, Justin Turner, Jackie Bradley Jr., Trevor Rosenthal, and Yadier Molina. I'm not going to go into those specifically, but those are also just plenty of personal opinions on this. Let the griping begin. There was absolutely no way that Marcus Stroman or Kevin Gausman were going to get almost $19 million per year, so taking the qualifying offer was a no-brainer for these two. While the QO isn't really the same as a free agent contract, I'm still going to count it here. Stroman was already going to get a 1-year deal because of him opting out of the 2020 season, so why not go for the 1-year deal with a guaranteed $18.9 million? Gausman probably could have gotten a multi-year deal with a team like the Yankees, but he also wouldn't have gotten this much money per year. While these contracts are safe bets for them, the true gamble is if they can pay off for a bigger payday next offseason. Drew Smyly has never been an ace-type pitcher in his career and has always been either a back-end starter or a mediocre starter at best. His $11 million contract is a lot more than he's worth, especially for a Braves team that had much better options available and could have gotten them for better prices. He's solid, but $11 million is way higher than he's proven to be worth. I know he's been on the rise for the past couple years, but a 4-year contract for a borderline top 10 catcher seems like a bit much. The AAV is fine, but it's the 4-year part that can make this go ugly fast. I get the Mets didn't want to go for Real Muto, and McCann was the second best option on the free agent market in terms of catchers, but just a matter of if going for that second option pans out. Because 4 years can be a long time, and catchers can have a brutal decline. I understand that Liam Hendricks has been one of, if not the best reliever in all of baseball, but my god is this a ridiculous contract. $18 million a year for a closer is never a good gamble to take, similar to catchers. He's been dominant for the past 2 seasons, yes, but you can't guarantee that much money to a reliever. Just ask your crosstown rivals how that went when they paid Craig Kimbrell. You better hope Hendricks is worth every penny, or else, like the Kimbrell contract, this is going to get real ugly real fast. This is what I like to call the Toronto tax, where the Blue Jays have to pay extra money to a free agent due to differences in each country's currency. I think $25 million a year could have been reduced somewhere around $20 or $21 million. I think this is a great contract for the Blue Jays, even with them having to give Springer more money than he probably deserves. One of the bright spots, though, is that George Springer has the potential to be an MVP caliber player, a player who the Blue Jays desperately need to go with their young core, so a proven veteran like Springer will definitely help. Look, I know Real Muto is arguably the best catcher in baseball, but holy fuck, this is a big overpayment. $23 million a year for a team that was crying poor to start the offseason seems like a lot much, if you ask me. Paying catchers a high amount of money tends to not go well, and this, being the biggest contract for a catcher in MLB history, it seems like it's going to be set up for failure. At least with Yasmani Grandal last offseason, he got less years for less money, but all that he got was what he was more worth and closer to what he deserved. Real Muto is not in the tier of players who should be paid $115 million, maybe $90 to $100 million max. It also doesn't help that the Phillies now have to add this contract to the list of other massive overpayment contracts that they've recently signed, including Zach Wheeler and Bryce Harper. If George Springer got a Toronto tax on his deal, then I'm just going to assume that this one's Toronto tax is like half the contract. Marcus Semien is in no way worth $18 million per year. I'm sorry, but I'm just not a big Marcus Semien guy. I get he's a solid player, but 2019 was a huge anomaly when compared to his past seasons. LeMahieu and Springer had better MVP cases than Semien did that year, and they both finished lower than him in the voting. Take 2020 into account, and that just proves my point even more. Semien's still a good player and should be fine in Toronto, but nowhere near $18 million good. Didi Gregorius is an average player who is league average hitter with league average defense who only ever pulls his homers, does well for each home team he plays for because they favor lefty pull hitters and he can't hit lefties. Not much to say other than $14 million per year for 2 years is more than an average player like him should be getting. This part is essentially just the same as what I said for Drew Smyly but for a hitter. Next. And now the contract we've all been waiting to talk about. Trevor Bauer is one of the most delusional players in baseball to think that he's worth $40 million per year. And spoiler alert, he's not. He's absolutely not worth $40 million per year. He had one good 2-month stretch to win the Cy Young, which he didn't even lead in a bunch of the more analytical categories. He so obviously is using foreign substances that he might have just got caught and is surprised that he's being caught despite the fact he's literally gone out and said, hey, I'm using foreign substances, and MLB doesn't care. He can be such a head case at times, and his performances can be massively inconsistent. We all know what he's trying to do for the game of baseball. While I agree with what he's trying to do, I don't agree with how he's doing it. And $40 million for this year, combined with another $40 million next year, it's going to be very difficult for the Dodgers to re-sign Corey Seager because only an idiot would opt out of a guaranteed $40 million. Yeah, the Dodgers can do this kind of shit for no other reason than why not, but it's still a horrible contract. Good luck trying to re-sign Corey Seager, Dodgers. Though, they'd probably be able to do that too, honestly. Well, I'm glad we were able to get through all that. With all those contracts signed, spring training is now underway. And there won't have to be any other ridiculous contracts signed. Oh, god damn it. What is AJ Preller on, and can I have some, please? Like, seriously, was throwing all that money at Machado and Hosmer not enough? Or all those trades for Darvish, Snell, and Musgrove? Like, seriously, what the fuck, AJ? I get that Tatis is the new face of baseball and a budding superstar, but holy fucking shit is this a ridiculous payment. You gave someone who hasn't paid a full season $340 million. He's only played one real half season and 60 games, and he already has found himself injured this year. And this is probably the biggest gamble contract of the offseason. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm rooting for this to work out, as I know every fan base but the Dodgers are, but this can have a massive backfire if it doesn't work out. Well, that was a big way to end the offseason. Surely there won't be any more overpaying contracts. Are you kidding me right now? So, the Royals need an excuse to remind themselves that 2015 was in fact a year that it happened, and decide to do this. Here's the difference between Perez when compared to Realmuto and Grandal. Realmuto and Grandal are actually good, and top two catchers in baseball. Salvador Perez had one good 60-game stretch in 2020 and hasn't always been like this. He had some good moments and stretches, but when he's been down a lot. In 9 seasons, he's had an OPS plus under 100 4 times. Not to mention a bunch of Mickey Mouse All-Star appearances. It's a bad deal from the Royals financially, and it's also kind of sad that this is the biggest contract in franchise history. But the Royals do have a young and upcoming pitching staff, so I guess having the veteran leadership in form of a catcher isn't all that bad. Okay, now the offseason is over. Opening day is here, and all the contract negotiations have ended. Surely now nothing big will happen. Are you fucking kidding me? The Mets managed to make a good move and turned into a very Lil Mets moment. Like, bruh, you gave $91 million more than the max that Francisco Lindor is actually worth. I knew the Tatis contract was going to make the Lindor negotiations harder for the Mets, but oh my god, was Lindor asking for way too much. This is the middle ground? Well, that's just sad. Yes, I know he's a fantastic player, but there are plenty of shortstops that are upcoming free agents that are better than him right now. Trevor Story, Carlos Correa, and Corey Seager, I would argue, are all better than Francisco Lindor. Oh, but he's a player who's based on defense and is an elite hitter still. Yeah, but A, he's a defensive specialist player, which means he's not worth as much as people say he is. Just look at Colton Wong and Jackie Bradley Jr. And B, his hitting has been on the downward trend as of late. If anything, he's worth about $250 million max. I understand Steve Cohen wanted to make a statement in his first year, and while this certainly is one, it's just a heavily overpriced one. But hey, at least he gets $341 million to flex on Tatis's $340 million. Before I end this video, these are just a few contracts I wanted to mention, but I wasn't fully sure what category to put them in. These contracts all I feel like could really fit in one or the other, and I'm just not fully convinced on which one. First is Charlie Morton, and maybe it's just the Rays being cheap here, but $50 million for Charlie Morton seems like a bit too much to give a pitcher on a 1-year deal. On the other hand, Morton has been outstanding in the past, and the argument could be made that he would deserve more. This one stumps me. This one baffles me here. The underpayment is $18.75 for a great infield and utility player. The overpayment is that over 3 years. Tommy La Stella seems like he would have fit better on a 1 or 2 year deal considering the injuries he's dealt with in recent years. He also has been starting the season on the bench for the Giants for some reason, so I really don't get why you'd give a 3-year contract to just some guy to be on the bench. Now this contract right here is why this whole category exists. With how good Ozuna was in 2020, I was expecting him to get a large payday. The problem is also with Ozuna's injury history, so giving him $16 million a year can be a huge risk, but also can be seen as a big underpayment, seeing as how much he can change the game single-handedly, as he showed with Atlanta. I had a feeling he was going to stay with the Braves no matter what, similar to what LeMahieu did with the Yankees, so again, this could have just been a reduced contract he was willing to take. It's a shame, though. I was kind of hoping he was going to actually sign with Tampa and that the Rays would actually spend money on a guy. Our final contract of the video is Lance McCullers Jr. $80 million for a guy like him can be a bit of a risk considering how he's more injury prone and isn't his usual dominant self anymore. But when he does have a dominant self on the mound, he's worth a lot more than $60 million per year. It's a gamble both ways, but at least Houston has their ace for the foreseeable future after Greinke probably leaves. So what have we learned today? Well, one thing is that teams definitely will do what they must in order to get their guys. What also seems very intriguing is next year's free agent class. I expect a lot more overpayments next year as well when compared to this one, especially with all the elite talent available. Until then, let's see these guys play. Play ball.
Yeah, some cushion would be nice. Or Stevenson lifting one. Deep right center. See you later. Bullpen for Andrew. And the Nats get that run right back. Wow, what a man.